Northern Power Women podcast. For your career and your life, no matter what business you're in.
Hello, I'm Sam Walker. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Northern Power Women podcast. Firstly, a huge thank you to you for downloading and for listening as well. Please do spread the word amongst everyone you know. Email people you work with, spell it out in biscuits on the boardroom table, get a tattoo. Whatever works for you, we really appreciate you sharing. And a very special thanks if you've taken the time to send us some feedback. It has been so brilliant to hear what you've had to say, and we would love to hear more from you. So please do get in touch anytime on Twitter at North Power Women. That's at North Power Women. Or of course on email at podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. That's podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. Right, let's get on with the episode. Coming up, you'll hear from the head of news at national BBC station, BBC Radio 5 Live. Her name's Rozina Breen, and she talks about some of the challenges she's faced that surprised her.
I suppose a couple of things, which is maybe one about being a woman and maybe the other is about being an Asian woman. And they both surprised me, and I just sort of remember saying to my husband, oh my God. And I don't know why I was saying, oh my God, because I read about this stuff every day and I hear about it every day and I know it's an issue. But I think when it becomes a personal experience, you do sort of have that kind of slightly OMG moment.
In Ask The Hive this month, a place where you get to ask the question, and the Northern Power Women Network provides, if not all the answers, then a whole load of really great suggestions. It's all about setting up a business or two.
I would go back to the drawing board and just map out certain things, answer certain questions about where my skill set lies, what's my passion.
And on our discussion panel, things as ever get lively.
I hate that word. I truly hate it with a passion because I think it's the wrong word.
But first, let's check in with the founder of Northern Power Women, Simone Roche, for some news from HQ.
A lot going on this month, as ever, in Northern Power Women world. It's been a great month launching the first Northern Power Women podcast to such great feedback. Thank you to What Goes On Media and Sam Walker for making this happen, and to all of you for subscribing. Please do keep the sharing and the shout-outs going. This month we've hosted the first ever NPW Live at AQL in Leeds. We had 200 guests, 16 talks, 19 storytellers and performers. We also recorded live this month's podcast panel, which I really enjoyed hosting such a stellar group. All of the talks from NPW Live, as well as the live blogs, are all available on northernpowerwomen.com. We're halfway through our reverse mentoring pilot, where we've had 13 of our future lists mentoring very senior leaders from across the north, and there's some great stories already coming from this. We've also received brilliant blog and news items involving you, which we are posting on our regular newsletter. So if you've got something to share or celebrate, please let us know. Save the date, 6th of March 2018, for the third Northern Power Women Awards. Nominations will be open from September, so do start considering which role models you will be nominating. And a big thank you to all of you that have offered email support to Northern Power Women. I'm very grateful for this overwhelming offer of generosity. If you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to host a live recording, sponsor an episode, or have a question for Ask The Hive, please contact us at podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simone. Don't forget, you can follow everything that Northern Power Women do online at northernpowerwomen.com and on Twitter at northpowerwomen. Now, of course, in each episode of this podcast, you get to hear the frank discussion between three women on three issues that affect us all. And we'd love you to continue the conversation. In Simone's update, you heard her talk about the brilliant NPW Live. And that was also where this month's discussion panel was recorded, hosted by Simone herself.
This is so fantastic because we are taking the opportunity. We are currently here in the wonderful city of Leeds and we're hosting NPW Live today. So we are just about to record our live podcast. And here joining me on this wonderful stage at AQL, we have Natasha, Natalie and Miriam. And I'm just going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name's Natasha Salem. I'm one of the heads of technology at Sky here in Leeds, and I'm also a massive advocate in trying to get more women to sidestep into the wonderful world of technology.
I'm Natalie Reynolds. I'm founder and CEO of Advantage Spring. We're a negotiation firm, and I'm passionate about trying to get more women negotiating and feeling more confident about doing so.
Hi everyone, I'm Mariam. I help to improve the lives of individuals and communities through policy development and civil service. I'm currently working for communities and local government, but this year I joined the Future List for the Northern Power Women, which was really amazing. Yeah, there's a really great group of amazing women on there, so privileged to be part of it.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for this amazingly supportive audience. What do you think? My name is Simone Rocha. I'm the founder of Northern Power Women. I am delighted to be hosting you today. So let's talk about a recent play that asked an audience every night, what would it be like if women ruled the world? What would it be like if women ran the sector you work in? A bit more broadly, how helpful an exercise like this, even with your tongue firmly in your cheek? What do you think? Women rule the world. Natasha?
It'd be a lot better, wouldn't it? I think it goes back to a little bit of what Natalie was saying. I think women approach things in a different way around collaboration. There's less potentially aggression, less machoism. So I hope that it would create more dialogue, more communication. And so I think on that front, I think it would be incredibly beneficial. But equally, the same thing I argue around gender diversity. I don't think I would want a world run just by women. I want a world that's run 50% by women and 50% by men, and I think that all voices are brought into the table on that. But as the dial is so paltry in the other direction, it's quite nice to think of a world just run by women.
Natalie, what do we think?
Yeah, and I agree. I think the whole thrust of what I was trying to get across in my talk is that women do tend to approach things slightly differently. Not that we're necessarily naturally more collaborative, but we seem to understand that it takes time and effort to actually collaborate effectively. And I think we are a lot more open, as I said, to seeing compromise as a positive outcome. I think a lot of men, unfortunately, view compromise as a negative thing. And I think if women ruled the world, perhaps we'd see a lot more compromise. I would say, though, just as a note of caution, because power is a very important dynamic in my sector, in the world of negotiation, power does corrupt, and I don't think women are immune to that either, so I just think we need to be mindful of that.
Okay, let's not corrupt. Mariam?
So I think in my organisation, the civil service, we do quite well on gender equality. So in the most senior kind of positions, we've got about 40% women, and currently 4 women heads up our kind of main departments. Which is actually down from 8 in 2010. So, you know, we've still got a bit of work to do. But I think for me, definitely, it is really very important to have women in senior positions, but not in a token way. I think that we need a lot more women in kind of boards and committees, and not just one woman. We need several women, and we need that diversification of views, because one of the challenges that we have is quite homogenous thinking. So we'll have, in a softer way around that power and control, kind of reading the same types of newspapers or radio shows, and actually that kind of social mobility piece is very important to me, and shifting the dial on that.
Okay, so we have all come from different places to be here at AQL today. So we talk so much about opportunities in the north for high-level jobs and business development, but how much is transport infrastructure an issue in all of this? What do we think? Natalie, you've come up here from London today?
Yeah, I drove it from London today, and I'm Yorkshire born and bred. I'm from East Yorkshire, and I would love more than anything to move back up here. But if I'm going to be brutally honest, there isn't the diversity and volume of companies to generate the work, and I would be literally up and down the M1 every day to try and meet, or living away from home to try and meet the demands of running the business that I run. So I think it's a huge issue, and I think transport and infrastructure is key to seeing any type of change, and it's certainly one that I personally, passionately would like to see.
What can we do? You know, how much does intercity connectivity impact on your organisation, Marianne?
I think it's massive. So we feel that the kind of power base is in Westminster, it's in London. So in order to get the really sexy policy jobs, you've got to be in London. And I've spent the last 2 years actually working part-time in London. But there is so many amazing, exciting opportunities in the north, that really just need to be maximised and capitalised on. So, the time it would take me to get from Manchester to London would actually sometimes be the same amount of time to get from South Manchester to Preston in the north, and actually that, just needs to be improved. But I think we also, we don't make enough of the technological capabilities to use that infrastructure as a way in which, of making those connections. Yes, you do have to make them face-to-face, you do have to travel, but that digital connection capability is not being maximised.
Natasha, you're the head of technology at Sky. Come on, what's the answer?
So it's a really personal question for me, because at the BBC I worked there for 4.5 years. I spent 4.5 years commuting 2 to 2.5 hours a day each way, going from Leeds to Salford each morning. And let me tell you, the M62 can be a cruel beast sometimes. And that's really challenging. And so this is my personal opinion. I don't begrudge the 2.5 hours from Leeds to London. It's a really nice journey. I can sit, I can do my work, and if I need to get up quicker, then I can fly. What I think the biggest problem for us in the north is actually east to west. I don't think it should take so long to get from Leeds to Manchester. I think, opening up what the Northern Powerhouse, I suppose, was trying to do with economic benefits, but actually getting connectivity, improved connectivity between Sheffield to Leeds, Leeds to Hull, Liverpool, Manchester, all of that sort of area, Newcastle. That's where the biggest problem is. We've got amazing talent bases in these cities, but if they're stupid enough to do what I did for 4.5 years, it is a massive sacrifice to travel was 44 miles. So I think that's what I would love, is I'd love better trains, better transport links going in the north of England.
Or we could just teleport, right?
Yeah, right.
We've all got superpowers, right? So we clearly hear an awful lot about the issue of the amount of women in technology and other similar industries. We also know that there is an issue with the culture in a lot of these industries. Where and how can we start to make the real change? Let's stop talking about it, and how can we really make the change? Natalie.
I knew you were going to come to me. For me, I worked with the police at the start of my career for nearly a decade when I was working in the Home Office and other departments, and I'm quite used to what I would call, and I hate that I have to call them this, quite blokey environments. And I used to talk a lot to people about how do we change this? How do we get people thinking differently? How do we make it more accessible? And for me, there's some quick wins, but there's long-term change that we need to think about. And it has to come from the bottom and the top. You can't just force down this idea of, we're open, our culture is good. People have got to live that. And I think people have got to be given permission to live that. So I think it's about recognising that change takes time, but also looking for quick wins that you can implement to make people feel that they can thrive in a certain environment rather than being intimidated by it. And it's like the negotiation table. As long as it continues to be portrayed as a very adversarial and combative practice, it's going to put people off. So we need to speak more about the benefits of it not being like that. And people need to see it not being like that and see the benefits that can bring.
Natasha, I know this is definitely way up your street.
I think one of the things that I talk a lot about is that tech needs a rebrand. It sounds to me really dry, and I work in the industry, and it isn't dry. It's incredibly creative, and I think that the word tech can come across as quite dry, and I have a bit of a personal campaign about this because it gets clubbed up with STEM. So we have science, technology, engineering, maths. And I hate that word. I truly hate it with a passion because I think it's the wrong word. I think the real word is STEAM. Because I like the idea of steaming all the time. But that the word that's missing is the arts. Without design, technology is nothing. You look at your iPhone and the design work that Johnny Ive and his team did and the intuitive interfaces, that's what makes a great product. That's what makes great technology. And if we started to actually sell it more as STEAM, and actually focus on how creative the industry is and artistic and collaborative, you, I think, would get more women considering it as a career path. But separately, I think we need to do more about actually allowing people to sidestep into the industry with transferable skills like I did. And I think that is another key thing for me in technology, is actually demystifying the different roles that are available in technology. It's not just coding. There's product owners, content writers, bloggers, social media, events organisers in tech, and that's all tech careers. And we have to rebrand what a job in technology looks like, and also allow women with transferable skills to move into that role.
Marianne, are we steaming?
Yeah, I think I can definitely see the steam coming off you. But I'm a big believer in the power of outreach in schools. I honestly think that if we want to make this change, we've got to start early. And we're talking about the awareness, but we also want to have role models. So how many of those of you that are working in the tech industries are actually going out into schools and sharing all of your passions and your amazing work that you're doing? And why don't we kind of give equipment to kind of young girls or to kids in schools and say, right, just go off, kind of, film, video, and tell your story, come back, experiment. We need to be, using your words, a lot more disruptive in terms of the school curriculum, and actually kind of helping to do a bit more of a pull, really, with younger women that actually could get into the industry and change it.
And I think some of that, the media has a massive role to play in it. I mean, if you think about technology role models in film and TV, we've got IT crowd, that's men. You've got Silicon Valley, more men. And the media has a lot to play in its commissioning and its storytelling to actually talk about how interesting the careers in tech are, but also actually portray females in these roles as well in TV and film, so that they become role models for women and young girls going, I want to be that person.
Yeah, but it's kind of like what happened, it's kind of like with the legal profession, that was where I started off, and you had a whole generation of women growing up watching Ally McBeal and The Good Wife and everything else, and I'm not embarrassed to say I probably went to law school because of Ally McBeal. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, should I?
So just on that topic of role models, that's a big passion of Northern Power Women. So who's your key role model? Marianne.
I know. I mean, I would always say it's my mum. She's been the most inspirational person for me, both in terms of her work ethic, how she kind of really champions being a really strong, positive role model as a Pakistani woman, and what she's done for me and my family. I just hope that I can be like her. But can I also just say thank you to the male champions of gender equality that are in the audience as well today, because I just think that actually they're really important also to be part of this movement. So please do also kind of share and nudge your other counterparts to come to events like this and to talk about gender equality, because it isn't just a female debate, it's for all of us to get involved in.
Absolutely great. Natalie, your role model.
Well, you stole my answer.
What, Marianne's mum?
Unbelievable. I mean, my mum's an obvious one. She raised 3 kids by herself, and again, similarly taught me to she taught me I could do whatever I wanted, and I think that's what's so important. I grew up with a belief that if I worked hard, I could do whatever I wanted, and that's never left me, and I try and push that onto everybody else. If you believe in yourself, if you work hard, it's not going to be plain sailing necessarily. You'll meet barriers and you'll meet resistance, but believe that you can and you will. On a slightly more kind of bizarre note, but one that I always, if I ever get asked the question, who would you have at a dinner party? For me, it's Elizabeth I. She's a huge role model of mine, and I remember as a kid reading about her and thinking, wow, when all the books were full of the men in the Crown, she stood out for me, and that will always be the case.
Thank you. Natasha?
I'm going to have to copy and say my mum as well.
Mum's rock, right?
Yeah,
and
Mum's rock. And dad's as well, my dad too.
Dad.
I was lucky, at the Empowering Women thing that I did a couple of weeks ago, Lauren Verne kind of said, people keep saying, Sheryl Sandberg and people like that. And she said it's really important to have some, she called it crap role models as well. And what she means is that we've got to be careful with role models, that if you put them on a pedestal and they're so high and achievable, then you will never feel like you've ever kind of everything you've done is not as good as what Cheryl's done. And, you know, Cheryl's kind of untouchable, right? You know, and she's an incredible inspiration, but having sort of role models which, you know, you can relate to a lot more, you know, potentially is something to look at too. And that's why I suppose mums is a really good answer. I really like Maya Angelou as well. So I think that she'd probably be on my list as well.
Well, thank you. You are all role models. I'm sure everyone will agree. So thank you, Natasha, Natalie and Marianne, for being part of this podcast. And thank all of you in the audience.
Thank you again to all of our panellists. There will be more for you next month, of course. If you've got a topic you would like raised, or maybe you'd like to take part in a future panel, we'd really love to hear from you. Just email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. OK, now it's time to delve into the mind of an individual at the very top of their game and find out what really makes them tick. What makes a successful person? How do they deal with the challenges and failure in their careers? And what do they think needs to change to get more women in their sector? Today, you're going to hear from the head of news at the national BBC speech network, BBC Radio 5 Live, Rozina Breen. I began by asking her about her path to her current role.
I never had a career sort of plan in my head. I kind of went on instinct, really. So at university, I was at Aberystwyth, and I think all I knew was what I didn't really want to do. And I wasn't really ready for the world of work. I knew I was interested in the media, so I ended up getting a student loan to do a master's, which took me to Leeds. And it was at that point that I was really, the master's was highly academic. It wasn't a practical course. There was no placement. But what I ended up doing was going for a BBC traineeship in Manchester. And I didn't get that. But what it did help me was get a foot into my local radio station in Leeds. So I went along saying, I've been for interview in Manchester. They were able to give some feedback. And I just started off as a production assistant doing freelance shifts until they said, OK, we can interview now for a contract. So I think it was a mix of serendipity. I think it was a mix of, follow your heart and aim for where you think you want to be. And I also sort of think way back then, it was probably easier. I think it's so much more competitive now. But ultimately, I think I was lucky. I fell in the right place at the right time and got the right person to take a look at my CV.
Talking about the right person, often we hear about people who've reached a certain level of success and they talk about the importance of having a champion or a mentor or a sponsor. Was that a person or persons in your career path who helped you? Who were they and how did you find them, if that's the case?
Yeah, I think I've always been sort of quite good at finding people who just give me a different way of thinking or tell me not what to do or to help me along. So sort of various people along the way, whether they've been former bosses who I just sort of think, you hired me. When I was at the BBC, I left for 6 years and then came back not thinking that I would stand a cat and hell's chance of getting back in. But I did. And I think I've been lucky enough to have people who've sort of seen my point of difference because they've had points of difference. And most recently, having been on the BBC News's Women in Leadership programme, I think was probably the biggest thing that sort of opened the doors to help me think what I wanted to do next, but also raise my profile, which is probably the single most important thing you can do. I mean, you have to be good, but you also have to let other people know that you're good. And I think that was brilliant. You're a bit like a magpie in that the people you have along the way that help and support you, I tend to write down the little things that they say that stick with me. So whether it's trust your instinct or surround yourself with good people or be authentic, which I know is a phrase some people like and some people don't like, but essentially it's not changing who you are to get to where you want and always going at things because you really want to. So the Women in Leadership programme had a series of guest speakers and they were brilliant. And I went to see one of them a few weeks ago, Heather Rabatz, who said... what did she say? It was she was talking about feel the fear. Don't just look up, look out, take risks. And that was a thing that really stuck with me. And, Tina Brown talking about how as newsmakers we never hear enough about what women think of the story, and we never go back to the story to tell things through women's eyes. Or Ruth Rogers at the River Cafe, who was talking about in her sort of career how, she had really young kids at the time. And she said, the kids will always be okay. And it's true. I've got 3 teenage kids now, and actually they are all okay. We angst, but it's more a self-angst rather than the impact on our kids. So you sort of collect little nuggets along the way that stick with you, and they become your Bible.
You said something there that really struck with me, Rozina, when you said you don't have to just be good, you have to tell other people that you're good. Did you ever struggle with that? Did you ever struggle waving and going, look at me? And do you think it was particularly a struggle because you were a woman? Are we used to waving and going, I'm great?
Yeah, I think many of us do struggle to put our hands up. It's really interesting now being in the position that I'm in, and when you're recruiting the next wave of talent, how many people put their hands up. And I think I generalise a bit because I'll sort of think, the female candidates don't do that and the male candidates all do. And the female candidates are equally as impressive, if not even more so. So what is it that kind of puts us slightly on the back foot of being that way? And maybe it's just a different sort of style. I recently went to a talk by Simon Sinek, who talks about sort of female styles of leadership which men should also operate on. And it's not a deficit, it's not a weakness to say, well, do you know what, sometimes I cry at work, or it's okay to say I'm not really sure what the solution to that problem is. And I think it's a bit similar. I sort of think actually, what I try and do is recruit on potential. It's all about what can that person develop into. And personally, putting my hand up, I think there will be masses of people putting their hands up. So it's standing apart from the crowd. And you don't want to put up your hand just to say, this is me. You want to show something for it. And I'm always sort of saying to people, what are you famous for? What are the things that people will really go, oh, wow, that was so-and-so, and they were brilliant at that, or they really helped us achieve that, or this was their legacy. So you have to put your hand up because you're really passionate about saying something about your business, where you want it to go, who you are, what you're trying to achieve. And I think it always has to be based in what the audience need is, whether it's being the difference in a community's lives, or revealing an injustice, or telling the stories of people who don't really normally get a voice on air. But then you have to know how to do it in the right way as well, because it's a sort of fine line between coming across as being pushy and an egotist and just being a bit ineffective. And I would just say it's a slow burner. You generally, if you're determined enough and have some lucky breaks, will get noticed by the right people. And it's not about doing something every day or every week or every month. All you need to do is get under somebody's gaze once for them to spot you, and then that's enough. We tend to sort of react fast and do things really quickly, and actually it's taking probably a 5-year view of saying, that's who I need to get to know, or that's who I need to get to know me.
You mentioned about knowing what you're good at. It can be sometimes hard to identify that. What's your advice there if you think, I don't know what my USP is?
I think it has to be the thing that you love. And that feels maybe a bit trite or really easy at my age to say. I've always sort of thought, follow what your desire is and what your passion is, and that's when you will know what really motivates you is what generally you will be good at. And also you might be a list making person. It's really good to do lists. So what do I love about my job? I love working with people. I love bringing people on. I love telling stories in really different ways. I really love hearing voices that I've never heard before. So I think sometimes there is a pragmatic approach, which is do a list and really think about and score them 1 to 10. What comes out 1, 2, 3? I think talking to people, getting feedback, what do people say about you? If people say, do you know what, you're a great motivator, or do you know what, I really like the way you help us think differently, or, this is what we've learnt about you. Feedback can be a bit uncomfortable, but it can also really endorse the things where you think, actually, that's what I think I'm good at. It's great to know that other people above me and below me and on a sort of peer level also think too. So I think generally we know we're probably a bit shy of saying, oh, I'm really good at. I would never in 100 million years say, oh, I'm good at X, Y, and Z. But you can let other people tell you that, and then that just endorses what you secretly think or what you want to be good at.
Have you ever felt stuck in your career? And if so, what did you do about it?
Oh, yeah, God, yeah. We've all felt stuck at various points, haven't we? What have I done about it? What I've done about it, what I've learned to do is movement can be really hard. So, for example, I'll give you an example. When I was in Leeds, I was running the radio station and I loved it. I had a brilliant team, I had huge autonomy. I worked with a great management team, but I suppose I felt I was at a point where I wanted to move on and I wanted to try something different. And it was feeling stuck because we are so head down in our jobs sometimes that you don't have the networks that you need to help you think more outwardly or differently. And I think that's where the BBC News Women in Leadership programme really helped, because it was having all those nuggets from all the brilliant women speakers we had, like Heather Rabat saying take a risk. And a job came up in London. And obviously that was a little bit tricky because I had 3 kids at high school in Leeds, so I couldn't move everybody to London. So it was just a case of thinking laterally that, okay, I was going to try it and it wasn't the final plan. And, you know, I talked it through with my husband and I said to the kids, right, okay, these are 3 main things. One, that I will always pick up the phone. Whatever meeting I'm in, if you need me, I'll always pick up the phone. Number 2 is I will always come back midweek for any important events, whether that's school reports, school events, birthdays, whatever. And number 3, I said to them and my husband, if it's not working, I will give up the job and come back. So they had 3 promises. I knew what those promises were. We kind of had boundaries, and I didn't know what the end game would be, whether I would be in London for years, but I knew it was a sort of a stepping stone to what I would want to go on and do next. And then before that, it was a case of thinking, okay, what are the layers I need to my CV or portfolio that I can do within my current job? And that was about sort of chasing the passion. So it was about digital storytelling. It included a startup, which was My Bradford, which was all about getting people of Bradford to tell their stories and us publishing those stories on a Tumblr website. It was about working in partnership with Bradford City of Film. So essentially what I wasn't doing wasn't moving location or job title, but what I was doing was saying, okay, this is where I can delegate on the day-to-day business, and this is where I can push forward on the things that I think I can do anyway within my role that just extends my stretch, because ultimately we only get bored in our jobs because we want that bit of stretch. Or I do anyway. It's not really about the sort of the money or the title or moving upwards in the chain. It's about where does my passion lie next. So within the job, if you're stuck, make time for yourself. Make time, whether it's startup projects, whether it's doing podcasts, whether it's networking, whether it's writing blogs, whether it's doing some research. I think there is always time where you say, invest in yourself, because you are as important as anything else. And whether that's 10% of your week or whether you say every Sunday afternoon, I'm just going to focus on that. So it was less about the chase to move to something and the location difficulty, which is a kind of working mother that's always going to play in somewhere or other. And it was more about what is the stretch that I need in my head, so that by the time I'm ready to take the leap to the next job, I can say, well, as well as doing this, I've also done X, Y, and Z.
Are there any challenges you faced during your career that surprised you?
I suppose a couple of things, which is maybe one about being a woman and maybe the other is about being an Asian woman. And they both surprised me. And I just sort of remember saying to my husband, oh my God, And I don't know why I was saying, oh my God, because I read about this stuff every day and I hear about it every day and I know it's an issue. But I think when it becomes a personal experience, you do sort of have that kind of slightly OMG moment. And one was where, I was sort of in a big meeting. It was probably heavily male skewed and everybody was going around the table introducing themselves. And I was sort of sitting in the back row and just got bypassed by the next person ahead of me. And I always sort of think, actually, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt and you have to be generous with your thinking. So it could have just been they didn't see me, rather than the fact that I was a woman and they hadn't seen me in that meeting forum before and they didn't really know who I was. But I did it did make me sort of think, if I had been a man, would that have been different? And the other one was, I think, we talk a lot about tokenism. So in one of my appointments, not this one, but somebody fed back to me that, because it wasn't a sort of white middle-class male who had been appointed, that I was a sort of token appointment. And I sort of thought, oh, that makes me feel, I don't know how it made me feel, just a little bit sad, actually. But I just thought I can either dwell on that or I can just do the job that I've gone in to do and make a brilliant contribution, which is what I hope I did do in the end. So I think there will always be surprising things. I think there will always be barriers, and my sort of ethos is, if you see a wall, don't just bang your head against it, walk around it. There are loads of different ways of walking around the wall, and there will always be people who don't think you should be in the job or think you've got the job for a certain reason. That will always happen. You go into the job and you're determined to do the best. I think that is surprising, especially these days. And I have 2 boys and a girl, and part of the reason I went to London is because I wanted to show my boys that dads can be in charge. They can be in charge. I wanted my daughter to see that actually you can do things and make it work, and determination goes a long way, and don't let barriers sort of stop you, and to show them that women can be leaders. Actually, you can do it in your own way and in your own style. So I think for me, I focus less on the surprising things now, or the things that make me sad, and go, do you know what, we're just a collective, and we're moving forward, and we've come on a long way. I was sort of brought up in a single family household on free school meals, and that's made me a stronger and better person. And for my children, it will be a different experience. So I think the world will always be full of surprising opinion.
How have you coped in the past with professional disappointment? We all make mistakes, or we fail at something we really wanted to achieve in. When that's happened to you, how have you dealt with it?
I think that's where the benefit of having people who will just say, I don't think you should really send that email, or I don't think you should really react in that way, has been brilliant. Because in the peak of the moment, it's so personal. Of course it is. I haven't got this job because whatever. I think I've learned to recognise that A, it's a competitive field. B, that you have to have a good story to tell about yourself. And that C profile really does make a difference, because you can be brilliant, but if nobody knows about you, then that's not going to help. And ultimately, I think I do go back to the point, which is, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. What did you learn from it? I think you should always put your hand up for the stuff that you really want to do, because you don't know what that conversation is going to lead to later on down the line. So if you're putting your hand up, you might not get the job, but actually it's given you the opportunity to present yourself in a really good way and demonstrate ambition. At the point of disappointment, we don't think like that. It's really important just to take a bit of time away and reflect, because your personal reaction is really different to the professional reaction 2 or 3 weeks later. I just think it's good practice to do. I think putting your hand up, putting yourself forward is a good thing. And that's where having the extra layers, working on the things that you really want to work on, that kind of give you the stretch or the sort of professional happiness, is good, because it means that you don't put all their eggs into one basket. You have a plan that is probably part of a number of different plans.
What one thing could change to get more women into your line of work and into your level of work?
I think being the difference. And what do I mean by that? So telling your story a lot. And I'll give you an example. Somebody was saying to me that they didn't think they would go for a particular leadership job because they couldn't get in for a certain time to make a certain meeting because they were on the school run. And, you know, my advice to them was come to the interview, show the panel how brilliant you are, and come with a solution. So if you can't come for that particular meeting, how would you make sure that you prepped in time so that by the time you do come in, you are good to go? And also, I think we're so sort of obsessed by presenteeism and being in the office because you don't just stop thinking. When I was working part-time when the kids were little, I sort of would think, I'm walking out the door, but I'm not switching my brain off. So I think it's having those conversations with your team, with your management team, shouting about them, and when people are going for jobs saying, do you know what, I would welcome your application, or because you're part-time or job sharing, that's great. Two minds are better than one in a lot of cases. So I think it's demonstrating that and saying, you know, this is my career path. Everybody can have a slightly different career path. It's not by fitting into a certain mould. You know, diversity comes in many shapes and forms, whether it's working pattern, whether it's geography, class, ethnicity, gender, you know, it all matters. And I just think the more leaders we get who can demonstrate and reflect those things, the more people will think, okay, I've got a chance at doing that.
A huge thank you to Rozina Breen, Head of News for BBC Radio 5 Live. If there's an individual you would love to hear on this podcast, please do get in touch. Just tweet at North Power Women or email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. Thank you. So, we're nearing the end of episode 2, but before we do, it's time for Ask The Hive. This is the chance for you to ask a question on something you're interested in, confused by, or maybe stuck with in your career. You ask, and then through the power of the brilliant minds connected with Northern Power Women, you get some answers. Well, in a moment, you're going to hear next month's question from Kirsty, but first, this month, Kate got in touch and you responded.
My question is around choice in business and focus. So I left my full-time job a bit over a year ago now, and when I left to pursue my dreams and pursue my passions, and I did all those training courses that talked about passions and choice and what you were going to do. And so I decided to actually start 2 businesses. One was my art and one was presenter coaching, both of which bring me equal amounts of joy, and both of which, if I focused on one of them loads, would probably bring me a similar amount of money, although one's got a slightly bigger hill to climb, I think, than the other. So my question to you is, everything says you should choose one and focus on one and do one, and that you don't have to do a business with everything, but I really love both and I really want to do both and I don't know how to choose. So do I have to choose? How do I choose? How do I choose?
Hi, this is Minoti Parekh from This Pampered Life. I would first ask a question whether if both the businesses are complementing each other, because if that's the case, it's something very similar to what I am doing as well. I'm handling 2 businesses at the same time, but they are complementing each other. So I would say then stick to keeping both the businesses and probably being more organized in terms of dividing your time between both businesses equally and using each one to promote the other one, so you are saving that much time on individually promoting it, because if it's a package and if they're complementing each other, then you can possibly promote both simultaneously and create a brand image about yourself and thus about both your businesses. If both the businesses are completely different businesses, then I would go back to the drawing board and just map out certain things, answer certain questions about where my skill set lies, what's my passion, and what kind of a gap am I filling with the product or service that I'm offering. There will be most likely stronger answers only for one business because your skill set and your passion would be higher only for one business. So I would then just keep the other business open, but be passive about it. So only the business that comes in just through having the website on, etc. I would cater to those business inquiries, but not then waste too much time in promoting that business.
To answer your question, I'd say no. You don't have to choose. Success for both businesses is in the planning and strategy, taking time to focus on each business to bring out both your passion and commercial mindset and marry the two together.
Lots of people who came to NPW Live wanted to help on this question too. And it's a bit noisy, this audio, but that's because the venue was packed with inspiring, informed people.
So I think you need to focus on the first question of why are you even considering not doing two? Is it because not doing the two is making you unhappy? And that might help you find your answer at the root of why you're even thinking of maybe changing what you're doing. I got some great advice earlier at the Northern Power Women Live event where a lady talked about the banging noise in your head when you feel like you need to make a change. And then when you make the right decision, everything goes calm and it's like the clouds are parted. So if there's one decision that you feel like you're settling with and that makes you feel calm and happy, but you don't understand why, just go with it and trust your instincts that is probably the right decision.
I'd say that if you've got two businesses that are both flourishing, keep those doors open to opportunity. Business is about people. If you close down one whole side of the business, then you're limiting the people that you're going to meet, the opportunities you're going to be given, and where that can take you further. So I would say keep them open.
So I think whoever's asked this question will absolutely know the answer. So I think when we get something like that is that sometimes it's just about creating some safe, reflective space to think about that. So I think the person, whoever's asked it, should look at what their values are, what's really important to them, okay? And I'm curious as to why they have to make a choice. So, there's something around a belief here, why can't you have both? So I think we need a little bit more information around why they think there's a choice. My suggestion is if there isn't any particular need, why not continue with both? So it's as simple as that. But I always believe that you know inside the answer to the questions. You just need to take some time out.
Honestly, I think focus on one, straight up, because mainly having purpose and having a belief and passion in two different things can divide your energies, and focusing on one thing will potentially prove to be successful. If there's any way of bringing the two ideas together to form one sort of core purpose, that would be amazing, but you don't really... I think you should absolutely try and... It's all about energy, and if you divide your energy, you can't really give everything truly to one area, so definitely focus on one.
Well, as someone with two businesses, I think if you enjoy them both and you've got passion for them both and they're both making an equal income, it's about deciding, maybe looking at having somebody to help you as well, and looking at which bits of the businesses complement each other, so maybe you could double up on certain things. So like networking, you might be able to be as both businesses and get out that way, and then but also looking at who can help you, whether putting a small team together to support you and take the load off. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much to everyone who responded, and Kate, I really hope those collective words of wisdom helped you. Now, if you've got a question, a problem, a dilemma that you need some help with, please just do get in touch. Email us podcast@northernpowerwomen.com and we'll do the rest. Next month, the question for your consideration comes from Kirsty.
I work for a web development company in Manchester, and I come across lots of teams that are made up of young, white, middle-class men from usually affluent backgrounds. But I want to know if there are anything we can do to encourage more people from working-class backgrounds.
Can you help? What experiences or knowledge can you share? Please do record your answer using the voice memo on your smartphone and email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com, or open up WhatsApp on your phone. Add the Northern Power Women podcast on 07928 387 712. That's 07928 387 712. Start a new chat with us. You'll see a little microphone icon right next to the message box. You just hold that down when you speak, and then take your finger off the button at the end and your message will automatically send. If you want to hear any of these instructions again, just get online, northernpowerwomen.com, click on the podcast tab, and it's all there for you. Well, thank you so much for all your feedback. We'd love you to subscribe, to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. The next episode will be ready for you on September the 3rd. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Sam Walker, and this has been a What Goes On media production for Northern Power Women.